All right, with metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. So what am I doing right now? Why am I doing it? It's actually kind of a form of mindfulness. It's a way to check in on yourself, basically like from above. What am I doing right now? Why am I doing it? Things of this nature. Thinking about what you're thinking about. It is related to executive function. So there's several different things going on with the executive function. And we've talked about these before, self-control, working memory, flexibility, planning, things of that nature. It is related to meta memory too. And so this is a knowledge about memory. So you're like, I finished studying for the test yesterday. That is meta memory. On the executive function that they talk about here, the most important areas for a child's cognitive development and school success are these things. And so we've talked about this before, how important that these are, like self-control, inhibition. If you're tired of reading a book, but you have to finish it by tomorrow and you're forcing yourself to do it, that's self-control. That's inhibition, blocking out, maybe going out and having fun instead. Working memory, flexibility. Maybe if you're trying to work some puzzle and it's not working, you try a different strategy, that's flexibility. And again, this is where it's at. If a kid becomes good at these things, they'll probably do well in life. The next thing the book talks about related to this is going to be intelligence, the ability to solve problems and to adapt and to learn from experience. So intelligence, the ability to learn from experience. One of the ways they measure it is the Stanford Binet tests. So figure 7.6, if you want to look at that. You've probably heard of it. It's on a normal distribution. Most scores fall here in the middle, and then a few scores will be at the extremes. With the Stanford Binet, it is a composite score, so it's just one number. Some researchers, though, they think that there's, many types of intelligence. So you maybe have high intelligence here, but maybe not high intelligence in this area. So if you're just getting one score from an intelligence test, for some people that's like a deficit for that test. As an example, Sternberg, for example, he had a theory of intelligence that includes 3 different types of intelligence. Sternberg, very famous psychologist, he used to work here at OSU for a little while. The first one is analytical intelligence, the ability to analyze, judge, evaluate, compare, and contrast. The next one is creative intelligence, so the ability to create, design, invent, originate, and imagine. And then practical intelligence. We talked about those other 2 before, but practical intelligence, this is the first time we talked about it, is the ability to use, to apply, implement, and to put ideas into practice. Basically like street smarts, social skills, common sense type stuff. Children with the different patterns on these kinds of intelligence will look different in school. So for example, an analytical student, they may look like a good student, like on the surface. I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. So they like lectures, they're good at multiple choice tests, but they're considered smart, but it's just kind of like on this surface level because they're really good at regurgitating information. And for some people, that looks like it's smart. So creative intelligence, they may not get as good at grades, but they're doing their own way. They're trying to figure things out. And so at the end of the day, as they progress through life, they may actually be, smarter. Some teachers, though, may not like the creatives. And so they may favor the students to just, regurgitate the information that they gave to them because they like to hear, a mirror of themselves, essentially. If you think about this, if you owned a business, which kind of intelligence would you want? Think about that for a second. If you owned a business, which kind of people would you want? Which kind of intelligence would you want those people to have? I think you want all of them, to be honest, but I think you definitely want some of the creatives, like Elon Musk. He's not going to be out. I doubt he did, great passing multiple choice tests because he's a very creative thinker. So, also on the practical, they do make good, managers, politicians, things of that nature because they're able to work well with people. And so you definitely want those kinds of people on your team as well. There is another type of intelligence the book goes through. Gardner's 8 frames of mind. It's not going to be on the test, but if you're interested in this stuff, it is in my version of the book. It's in page 211 on evaluating these multiple types of intelligence. They say you can develop programs into instructing in the multiple domains. So if you have some people that are like this, some people are like this, you can create programs to help all of those people. So like in here, if you're good, let's go back to this other slide. If you're good with the analytical, in this class, you've got the quizzes, you've got the tests, you'll do great like that. If you're good with the practical or the creative, you're going to work well with others, so you'll do well in the group projects, maybe do well in the discussions. All that being said, there are some persisting doubts that multiple intelligence even exists. Some researchers don't believe it that. One issue with these distinctions is that if you do well in one area, you might do well in the others. So if you do well at multiple choice, you might do well in critical thinking as well. It's kind of related to this idea of how you do one thing is how you do all things. And I can see this. I think that a lot of this is going to be related to what's called conscientiousness, the idea that you want to do a good job. And so there are some students that are really high in conscientiousness, and I can go to the grade book and point them out really easily because they participated in all the discussions. They participated in all the responses. They did well on the tests. They did well on the quizzes. So they can do all those things. They can work well with others. They can still regurgitate information. And so, yeah, how they do one thing is how they do all things. Kind of related to this. If I do a correlation on the grades, and I used to do this every semester, I don't do it anymore because I already know the answer. But if I do a correlation on the grades and I look at if you missed any discussion responses or if you missed any of just the regular responses, you have lower test scores too. And it's because you're just lower in conscientiousness. You're not fully engaged. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just who you are, at least in this class. Basically, the people that are able to show up and they get the points, they're also going to show up on test day too. If they show up to the practices, they show up to the tests. Like last semester when I did those correlations, it was a 0.6. So it's a pretty high correlation, at least a moderate correlation. Correlation between, we'll talk about self-esteem next chapter. The correlation between self-esteem and grades is 8.2. So it's really low. But the correlation between you just showing up and attendance is another example. It's not just that you show up and because you're there, you learn the material. It's because you show up because you're high in conscientiousness. And so you're going to do well in all these other domains. How you do one thing, how you do all things. If you show up and you follow simple instructions, you're probably going to do well in other areas of your life. And so again, it's not really that much about intelligence. It's more about that executive function. It's about self-control than it is about different types of intelligence. A little bit more on intelligence. There may be 1,000 different genes, literally, that contribute to intelligence, which makes sense. All these things are interconnected. The correlation between genes and IQ, though, isn't super strong. So a lot like these other things, the genes are going to provide a range, and then the environment, hones in on that, the nature and the nurture working together. The book talks a little bit on cultural fair tests, the idea of trying to design tests that are free of cultural bias. As an example, some say that IQ tests are influenced by the culture that they're given in, which makes sense. And so people from another culture may have a lower score, and it's not because they're lower intelligence, it's because the tests have been accidentally rigged in favor for a person from the in culture. So they have tried to work on this idea that intelligence tests can reflect the cultures of the test takers more than others, like Sternberg. He's tried to work on these, what they call culturally reduced tests. You cannot make, according to him anyways, you cannot make a test completely free from culture, but you can make culturally reduced tests, and so then the intelligence levels start to level out a little bit between cultures. The last thing in this area is the idea of gifted kids, and so these are going to be above average intelligence, have superior talent for something. IQ above 130 is considered gifted. There are 3 criteria for being considered gifted, according to the textbook. The first one is precociousness, so you develop quicker than other kids. You seem mature for your age. The second one is march to their own drum, so it goes back to that creative intelligence. They're independent and they can think for themselves. And then the last one is a passion to master, so they want to do really well in some area. So you got precociousness, march to your own drum, passion to master. The one thing that's not here that a lot of people think it is being bored. Just because you're gifted in, or if you go to school and you're like, oh, I'm bored because I'm so much smarter than what the teacher is, that's not actually one of the things for being gifted. A person that's gifted, this idea that they have a passion to master, means that they're going out and they're trying to do things. They're marching to their own drum. They're trying to get things done. So this idea, oh, I'm so gifted, I'm bored with everything, it's not a real thing. So yeah, easily bored, not one of those. People think that gifted people are bored, but not according to the textbook. So if someone does tell you that, they're like, oh, I don't do that well in school because I'm bored, I'm above it. Probably not. All right, that's it for chapter 7. Thank you for listening to this lecture.